Okay, so next topic is asset valuation. So what was the first step? Identifying asset and value. So some people think that only cost of asset, cost of purchasing the asset is asset value. No, I'm giving you an example. Some people when they think about me, hey, Ajit is earning, suppose 2,000 per hour in training, correct? So here, but here for an hour, I'm sitting in an AC room, electricity. I've invested heavily in my gadgets for training. So all that thing contributes to our cost. Similarly, if you look at any firewall, okay, if you look at any firewall, that is also, people think about that, suppose we have purchased $10,000 firewall, we have purchased firewall for $10,000. So that's not the only cost. Suppose you have spent around $1,000 for giving training to the people, $11,000 is now. Now you have hired 2 people to run, manage, and maintain that firewall, and the cost of those 2 people are, like, billing to the customer is $3,000 each, so $17,000 now. And that firewall is protecting asset worth $20,000. So $36,000 is a cost. So all those things contribute to a cost. It's not only your cost of purchasing it. So what is the purpose of risk management? Ensure that IT risk faced by an organization are addressed appropriately. Assurance, to give an assurance to the management regarding the protection of assets. And yes, there are many regulations, legislation, which mandates the risk management process. For performing risk management, you need a team. Again, when you're working, you need not look out for all these people or stakeholders in a team. This is a situational and subjective scenario. Okay, like I'm performing a risk assessment. When I performed risk assessment, we only had 2 people from business and 2 people from business team. That's all. So it's an absolute list which has been provided here, and this depends upon organization to organization, function to function. So you may have information security officer, risk manager, network administrator, system business owner. Business people are must, and risk management people are must. So when you choose a team, they have to perform a risk analysis. So risk analysis, there are 3 steps to it: asset and information value assignment, perform analysis and assessment, and then countermeasure selections and implementation. So we have already seen asset valuation now. So next step is risk analysis. Like, you have identified the risk, now you have to analyze the risk. So there are 2 ways of analyzing the risk. Now, first one is quantitative. In a quantitative, there are mathematical calculation involved, because here we calculate the risk in terms of dollar values. So remember, when we talk about quantitative, it is applicable to tangible assets like firewalls, servers, people. Okay, this is thing you should remember. It is objective in nature, because here you are getting a value in terms of dollars. So that's the reason it is objective in nature. Remember, important. And third one is, as I told you, it calculates risk in dollar values. Then sometimes it is not possible for you to have everything defined and calculate in terms of dollars. Like for example, if I ask you, how tough is this course? You cannot explain that in dollars. You will say medium, low, high. So there are intangible assets like branding, reputations, where it is not feasible to or calculate things or risk in terms of dollar values. So in that case, we will go for qualitative. Qualitative, it is, remember, it is applicable to intangible assets like branding, reputations, imaging. It is subjective in nature. Because you see, if you ask me how, suppose Vivek is working in IT, Vivek is working since long. If you ask Vivek, just an example, he will say, fine, it's medium for me, tough for me. If you ask someone else who's not from that field, he will say, little bit tough for me. So you see, same thing, different perspective. That's why I said it's subjective in nature. Here, risk is calculated in terms of rank or rating, high, medium, low, etc. So if someone specifically talks about quantitative, always remember it is objective in nature. If someone talks about qualitative, it is subjective in nature. But if we go by a definition of ISACA for overall risk analysis process, overall, irrespective of qualitative or quantitative, it is subjective in nature. And I will explain that and prove it to you. Wait for the time. So now we are started doing the first one, the quantitative one. Here, there are mathematical calculations involved, but don't worry, I will cover it with you. I will explain in detail by explaining everything from basics. So there are key terms involved. What is asset? The total value of an asset. Asset value, total value of an asset. So suppose take an example. There is a server and cost of that server is $20,000. So asset value will be $20,000. Exposure factor, the percentage loss the organization would suffer if a risk materialized, also referred to as a loss potential. Let's take two scenarios here. Suppose there is a server and now there is a hacker group who is running DDoS attack on your server, and your server is working at 60% of its efficiency. So exposure factor is 40%. So 40 divided by 100.4. Another example, same server, 70% of the data is encrypted. Some hacker has accessed this server in an unauthorized manner. And 70% of data is encrypted, which means that how much data is exposed? 30%. So exposure factor in that case will be 30%. So this is how it is calculated. So in our case, let's take an example. It faced a DDoS attack, and now it is working at 60% of its efficiency. So exposure factor will be 40%. Okay. There's another term which we called SLE, single loss expectancy. What is the loss in dollars? What is loss in dollars if a risk is realized against an asset for single incident? for one time. What will be a loss in dollar if risk is realized against an asset for one time? So in this case, it is facing what is the risk? DDoS attack. If these DDoS attack is realized against an asset for one time, what will be a loss in dollar? So there is a formula for it, AV into ES. What is AV? $20,000 into ES 0.4. So this will be your $8,000. Clear till now?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So Ajit, this single loss expectancy, so you mean to say just like for a one time
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
only if something happens?
So if this, when we calculate the risk, if you look at the definition of a risk, what is the definition of a risk? The risk is a product of likelihood into impact. Normally, when we calculate the likelihood, okay, it is calculated on a yearly basis. And this SLE is more like an impact that we have calculated. Okay. This is
Okay.
like, okay, it is all correlated. Don't worry, the next thing is coming up. The next one. So till now it is clear, yes. If you have
Yes.
a risk of a DDoS, that what if that DDoS attack is realized against this for one time, then what will be a loss? So there is a formula, asset value into exposure factor. That is $20,000 into 0.4, that is $8,000. That will be, if this DDoS is realized against an asset for one time, the value, the risk will be $8,000. Okay. Now, when I told you risk is calculated as a product of likelihood into impact, correct? So SLE that we have calculated, that's more of an impact. And likelihood is normally calculated on a yearly basis. So probability of occurrence, or ARO, annualized rate of occurrence, is like what is the probability of this DDoS attack, these DDoS attack happening over a period of a year. What is the probability of this DDoS attack happening over the period of a year? Like if I say, I will give you an example. If I say the probability of this DDoS happening over once in a year, so ARO will be 1 divided by 1, 1. If I say the probability of this DDoS attack is once in 10 years, so it will be 1 divided by 10.1. If I say the probability is once per 100 year, 1 divided by 100.01. If I say probability is once per 200 year, 0.005. If I say once per 5 year, 0.2. If I say once per 2 year, 0.5. If I say once per month, 12. If I say 3 per month, 36. So this is how it is calculated. So now, in my case, I will keep it very simple. The probability of this DDoS attack is once per 10 year. So ARO is equal to 1 divided by 10.1. Clear till now?
Yes.
Now, ALE, what is a loss on a yearly basis? Because I'm not interested in a monthly loss. I'm more interested, means one-time loss. I'm more interested in, okay, more interested in annual loss. So there is a very simple formula for it. That is ALE is equal to product of SLE into ARO. So what is SLE in our case? It was $8,000 into ARO 0.1. So this will be your loss on a yearly basis, if probability is once per 10 years of a DDoS attack, is $800. Total loss is $8,000. And if a frequency is once per 10 years, so you just divide by 10, that is $800 per year. That will be a loss. Correct? Clear?
Yes.
Park this for now, ACS. I will cover that later on. Okay. So I just cover that also. So this is your ALE which you have calculated. Correct? Now, this will be called as ALE before. That this is the ALE. You have not applied any countermeasures. Try to understand that what I'm saying. This is the ALE you have calculated of a DDoS attack. Correct? You have not applied any countermeasure. Now you have taken, you have used, or I would say you have applied, you have taken a subscription of one DDoS provider, okay, DDoS protection provider, and the cost of that subscription is, I would say, $300 per year. So this is what your cost of control, $300. Clear till now? Now, when you have implemented this ALE, you have implemented this countermeasure worth $300. The ALE, because main purpose of your risk assessment is to reduce the risk. Correct? Getting my point? The main purpose of a risk assessment is to reduce the risk. Earlier, your risk was $800. Correct? Say yes or no. Open up the mic.
Yes. Yeah.
Now you have implemented the countermeasure, which is worth $300. Okay. And now this countermeasure have reduced the risk, the ALE, now to $200. So earlier, the risk was $800, and now you have implemented a countermeasure which is worth $300. And now the risk is reduced to $200, correct? So what is return of investment here? Annual cost of safeguard is return of investment. Like, for example, you are getting $100,000 in your job. Just an example, please. I'm not aware of this. I'm talking in terms of US. $100,000. You have invested, okay, you have invested, just a simple example, you have invested $20,000 in some course. And now your salary package that you get is $150,000. So what is the return of investment you got? And earlier it was 100,000. Now it is 150,000. And what you have invested? $20,000. So return of investment, the actual return of investment is not $50,000. It's not $50,000 that you get a benefit. No, you have invested also. So that is now $30,000 is your return of investment. So earlier, ALE before was $800, correct? Now, after you implemented, it has reduced to $200, correct? So there is a difference of 600, correct? How much you have invested? $300. So you will put it in a formula, ALE before minus ALE after minus actual cost. So 800 minus 200 minus 300. So this is your $500 is your return of investments or total profit that you have earned. Hope this is clear.
Ajit, I understood the concept of ACS, but I fail to understand how did you get to $200? So if the
Look,
ALE is
try to understand one thing. There are certain things which you need to keep it hypothetical. Okay, I'm giving you an example here. We cannot look. I have given you a simple cost of a countermeasure, subscription. So these are main purpose of this concept is to let you explain that how cost is calculated, how that value is driven. Like I have just taken a hypothetical value offering.
No, that I understood. That's a hypothetical
Mm.
thing. So 800. So the investment is 300, right? So
Look,
800.
try to understand. $800 is my yearly before, correct?
Huh.
I
Hmm.
have invested in a DDoS countermeasure where I
Hmm.
have invested $300 on an
Hmm.
annual basis. A subscription
Hmm.
licenses that have taken,
Hmm.
correct? So how much I've invested? 3,000, 300.
300. 300. Huh.
Okay. Now, after I invested in this countermeasure, my yearly, my loss, the yearly loss is reduced to now $200. Earlier, my loss is $800, correct? When
Hmm.
I introduce a countermeasure here, countermeasure has an impact on likelihood and impact. Countermeasure will definitely reduce your likelihood as well as impact, correct?
Hmm.
So when I have
Yeah.
introduced a countermeasure, it will reduce the likelihood and impact,
Yep.
then definitely it will reduce the ALE.
Okay. Yeah.
Getting my point? When I am, look, I am diabetic. Okay, my value is around 140, 200 something. If I take medicine, that value will come down to 140, 130.
Hmm.
Kam hogi na?
Hmm.
So that is what we're saying. So when you introduce a countermeasure has an impact on likelihood and probability, likelihood and impact, correct? So that will reduce your ALE. आपका risk reduce हो जाएगा.
Huh.
Clear?
Okay.
That your risk
Yep.
is reduced.
Okay. Hmm.
But problem is that, but suppose that's give an example. $150,000 आपको package मिल गया. You got a package.
Hmm.
Correct? अब लेकिन अगर मैं एक्चुअल में जाऊं तो यू गॉट अ $50,000 प्रॉफिट.
Hmm.
बट वो $50,000 तो आपने $20,000 इन्वेस्ट भी तो किया है. तो
So
एक्चुअल रिटर्न ऑफ
technically it's only
इन्वेस्टमेंट क्या?
30.
टेक्निकली इज 30. सो
Hmm.
हियर माय रिस्क वाज $800, $8,000, sorry, $800. Now I have now I have invested in countermeasure, which has reduced the risk to, which has brought down the risk to how much? $200.
200. Hmm.
$200. So total risk reduction कितना हो गया? Means I got a benefit of 600, but nahi, I've invested in countermeasure also. So that
Hmm.
countermeasure also needs to be subtracted.
Hmm.
So that is
Which
the
is
total return of
300.
it.
Okay.
Got
Okay.
it?
I think now I get it. Yeah. Thanks, Ajit.
Okay, no worries. So always remember, Afreen and everyone, this countermeasure value, this return of investment value should not be a negative one. If it is negative, then आप सोचो आपने you have invested, sorry if sometimes I, okay, we all are Hindi, हम सब हिंदी समझ सकते हैं ना. So I hope. So suppose your value, your package is $100,000. You got a hike of $50,000. लेकिन जो आपने उस हाइक को अटेन करने के लिए that you have invested is $60,000, तो आप नेगेटिव में हो गए ना. So minus 10,000, correct? So normally, as per standard, this value should not be positive, should not be negative. It should be always positive. But look, there is no casting on a stone. Sometimes it's negative also, and I will tell you the situations. Hope this is clear. Everyone, any questions?
Yes.
Okay, so let me take you through two questions, where I will explain आपको चीजें. This will be more clear. Please speak up. Okay. Look, always remember one thing. When you're starting something for the first time or reading something for the first time, you will face hiccups because it's always a new thing, and that's pretty natural. But even if you get 10 to 15% of it, it's pretty natural and normal. Because next time when you read it, this 15% will become 30 and 40%. I give you an example. When I started in 2020, I started studying AWS. Bullshit, not getting anything. Very new thing, because after a long time, I was touching technical. Because from 2012 to 2020, I was more like a manager. Yes, I was a technical team manager, SOC, all things I do see. But yes, not a pretty much hands-on. So I face problems. But you see, I continuously study that, listen to it. Yes, now I know a lot of things in cloud itself. So that's the thing. Don't don't think it like that. You are in a live class. You're not studying any recording, listening to any recording. So if you have any questions, don't assume anything that I will listen to the recordings and try to understand that, because that's the reason that you are here for. So please ask the questions, because we Indians are pretty hesitant or shy to ask the questions. There is an ad of Tata Sky, and I believe in it. पूछने में क्या जाता है? किसी ने देखा होगा टाटा स्काई का ad? पूछने में क्या जाता है? भाई पूछ लो. You never know. ठीक है? So always remember that. Please ask if you don't understand.